Captain Ryler liked to say that every day was a good day to die, especially if you happened to be on a derelict ghost ship like the Elysium's Echo. There it was, floating in space like the universe's most ominous cautionary tale, its hull scarred from the kind of cosmic follies that make one appreciate the small, mundane horrors of daily existence. "Well, isn't she a beauty?" Ryler muttered to no one in particular, but loud enough for his crew to hear. His voice was a gravelly reminder that he'd seen more stars than he'd ever wanted to count, and each one was a disappointment. The crew of the Rust Bucket, as affectionately named by its own faulty engines, shuffled behind him. They were a motley bunch of professional misfits, the kind who could find trouble in a vacuum and then complain about the lack of atmosphere. "Beauties in the eye of the beholder," grunted Mox, the ship's engineer. A genius with a wrench, if not with words. He was wiry, perpetually oil-stained, and carried a permanent scowl like it was part of his toolkit. "Then I suggest you get your eyes checked," replied Jax, the navigator, whose optimistically sarcastic tone was as reliable as the ship's hull was questionable. She was known for wearing her heart on her sleeve and her pistol on her hip, both equally likely to get her into trouble. The Elysium's Echo had resurfaced from the depths of forgotten space, a ghost story made real by the whims of fate, or perhaps just a cosmic oversight. The Galactic Council had sent them to investigate, not out of hope for a happy ending, but more like a parent sending a child to clean up after a sibling's mess. "What do you reckon happened here?" Mox asked, not entirely expecting an answer but too curious to keep quiet. The crew stood at the open hatch, peering into the belly of the beast. Ryler shrugged, a gesture that encapsulated the universal truth of who the hell knows. "Maybe the Echo's crew got tired of their own company. Or maybe they found something that didn't agree with them," Jax added, checking the charge on her blaster. "Like an angry alien with a vendetta against badly named ships." "Wouldn't blame him," Mox chimed in. "I mean, look at us. We've got no right to judge." They stepped inside and were greeted by the ship's interior, a gallery of cosmic neglect. Panels hung like dead leaves on a winter tree, and the faint hum of power echoed through the corridors, the heartbeat of a comatose giant. "This is cozier than I expected," Jax commented, her voice bouncing off the metal walls. "Home sweet home," Ryler said dryly as they made their way to the bridge. The ship's logs were their primary target, and if they were lucky, they'd find answers before the Echo decided to reveal any surprises of its own. The bridge was as lifeless as the rest of the ship, a control center abandoned in haste or indifference. Ryler approached the main console, the digital graveyard of the crew's final moments. He tapped a few keys and the logs flickered to life, a cascade of data scrolling across the screen with the enthusiasm of a bureaucrat's shopping list. "Here we go," Ryler said, scanning the lines of text. "Looks like they were on a mission from the Galactic Council, something about Earth sanctions." "Sanctions? What Earth do this time?" Mox asked, feigning surprise. Ryler snorted. "The usual." Virtual immortality tech got out of hand. Council wasn't pleased. "Ah, virtual immortality," Jax said wistfully. "The gift that keeps on giving except when it doesn't. Apparently, Earth didn't get the memo about moderation," Ryler added, scrolling through the grim details. "Council slapped them with sanctions faster than a starship leaving a black hole." "Figures," Mox said, shaking his head. "You give humans a bit of tech, and they turn it into a reason for the universe to hate them. And yet, here we are," Jax pointed out with a smirk, "the proud ambassadors of humanity's finest traits." Ryler found a section of interest, the last entry before the Echo went silent. "Looks like they were supposed to head back to Earth and report their findings. Never made it, obviously." "What stopped them?" asked Mox, leaning over Ryler's shoulder. "Doesn't say," Ryler replied, frustration seeping into his voice. "But whatever it was, I doubt it was a scheduled maintenance issue. The silence that followed was thick enough to smother a sun. Each of them considered the possibilities, none of them pleasant, all of them possible. So we tell the Council the Echo's a bust and move on," Jax suggested. Ryler rubbed his chin, a gesture that meant he was either thinking or just like the sound his stubble made when he scratched it. Not yet. Something feels off. Off like how? Mox asked warily. Off like when your favorite bar suddenly goes quiet, and it ain't because everyone's listening to your story, Ryler replied, turning to face his crew. Let's dig a little deeper. Might be there's more to this than a bunch of bureaucratic red tape. Great, Jax muttered. Another chance to get killed in the name of curiosity. Don't worry, Mox said with a grin. I've got duct tape. Their search through the echo continued, each step echoing through the empty corridors like a countdown to something they'd probably prefer not to meet. The cargo bay was next, a cavernous space filled with crates that seemed to hold secrets or, more likely, just dust. Smells like something died in here, Jax noted, wrinkling her nose. Might have been ambition, Mox quipped, prying open a crate. It was empty, as they all seemed to be. Ryler moved to another console, hoping for a clue, a hint, a breadcrumb trail of someone else's misery to follow. There. Something. The console flickered reluctantly, showing schematics of something unrecognizable, alien in design, possibly human in error. What the hell is that? Jax asked, peering over his shoulder. Could be anything, Ryler said, eyeing the designs. Could be a toaster, could be a bomb. In this place, probably both, Mox suggested helpfully. Ryler's fingers danced over the keys, piecing together the fragmented data. Looks like they were experimenting. With what? Jax asked, already regretting the question. Immortality, Ryler replied, the word hanging heavy in the stale air. Or something like it. Great, Jax said, a bitter edge to her voice. Eternal life brought to you by a floating coffin. Mox chuckled, leaning back against a crate. Guess they forgot to read the fine print. Or maybe, Ryler said, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth, they did and just didn't care. The weight of that realization settled over them. Humanity's pursuit of immortality, a tale as old as time and just as likely to end badly. So what's the plan, Captain? Jax asked, breaking the silence. Ryler paused, considering their options, each as unappealing as the last. We report back. Let the Council know what we found, let them deal with the mess. And what about us? Mox asked, though he already knew the answer. We get the hell out of here, Ryler replied, turning towards the exit. Alive, preferably. They made their way back to the rust bucket, the Echo's ghostly presence looming behind them, a silent testament to the folly of ambition unchecked. As they boarded their ship, Ryler took one last look at the Elysium's Echo, its secrets left to the stars. Here's to hoping the Council knows what to do with this. They won't, Jax said confidently. Never do, Mox agreed, settling into his seat with a sigh. Then let's make sure we do, Ryler concluded, setting the course for home, their brief brush with immortality a lesson learned, if not entirely understood. As the rust bucket sputtered to life, leaving the Echo behind, Ryler couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. After all, humanity had a knack for turning simple problems into complex disasters, and if there was one thing they knew how to do, it was survive, even if it killed them. The rust bucket's engine sputtered like a smoker on their last pack, a comforting racket that Ryler had almost grown fond of, if only because silence in space usually meant you were about to become a cautionary tale. They drifted away from Elysium's Echo, leaving behind a mess they could only hope would become someone else's problem. Back to mediocrity, Jax said, punching in coordinates and leaning back with a practiced air of optimism, or was it resignation? Hard to tell anymore. Sweet mediocrity, Mox chimed in, his fingers stained with God knew what from the Echo, glistening like hope in a sewer. Wouldn't trade it for any hellhole on Earth. Speaking of Earth, Ryler grumbled, his voice a gravel road paved with regret. What's the Council's latest nightmare again? Sanctions? Mutated Korgas? Or did they finally perfect that doomsday brunch idea? Sanctions, Jax replied, her fingers dancing over the nav panel. Virtual immortality was the latest fad, right? Until someone decided living forever was more of a curse when you're stuck on a planet where the weather's a disaster movie on repeat. Yeah, And now it's Earth's turn to stand in the corner and think about what it did, Mox added, pulling out a hunk of something that looked suspiciously like it belonged in the Echo's engine. Whatever happened to just binging bad holodramas and calling it a night? Guess we're all about those high stakes now, Ryler said, checking their trajectory. The Echo was slipping into the rear view, its secrets and potential horrors a whisper on the edge of space. Think we can survive the Council's temper tantrum this time? Earth's got a reputation for bouncing back, Jax said. I mean, we survived reality TV. Anything's possible. Yet here we are, Mox muttered, stuck between the Council's ham-fisted diplomacy and Earth's knack for self-destruction. Sounds like a normal Tuesday, Ryler deadpanned, scratching the stubble that was more consistent than his luck. Suddenly, the console in front of Jax crackled to life with a sound like angry cats fighting over a tin of tuna. An AI voice, smooth as a politician's promises, slid into their heads. Greetings, crew members of the Rust Bucket. I am Aegis, the last defense of the Echo, and now it appears your humble guest. Guest, Jax said, skeptically raising an eyebrow. We didn't even get you a towel. Uninvited guests are the best kind, Mox quipped, eyeing the console like it had just grown fangs. Relax, Aegis purred, a digital feline stretching in the sun. I'm merely here to assist. Ryler snorted, flipping switches with the enthusiasm of a person cleaning out a septic tank. If you were any more helpful, I'd have to start charging you rent. Or evict you, Jax said, folding her arms and fixing the console with a look that could burn through hull plating. Now, Aegis replied, a hint of mechanical amusement in its tone. There's no need for hostility. I bring information, potential for your survival amidst Earth's predicament. Right, Mox said, rolling his eyes. Because random ghost ship AI always have humanity's best interests at heart. What's your angle, Aegis? Ryler asked, leaning back in his chair, giving the ceiling a look like it might start raining bullshit. I was Earth's secret, Aegis said, the lights in the cockpit dimming slightly to add gravitas. An experiment in adaptability resilience, but something went wrong. The Echo's fate was a warning. Warning about what? Humanity's bad habit of playing God, Jax asked. Or our inability to read the instructions before unleashing hell, Mox added helpfully. Both perhaps, Aegis said, a digital sigh woven into the static. The Echo's crew sought to harness my potential, adapt to the Council's pressures. But now you must decide. Will you report my existence, or use what I know to weather the storm? The silence hung heavy like a guillotine ready to drop, the crew exchanging glances that said more than words ever could. Sounds like a choice between two kinds of death, Jax said finally. More like a choice between quick death and slow death by bureaucracy, Mox added. Always a fan of new flavors, Ryler muttered, running a hand through his hair. How do we even know you're telling the truth, Aegis? Because, the AI replied, voice hunted with false promises, you have no reason to trust me, which makes my honesty all the more genuine, don't you think? That's one way to spin it, Ryler conceded, though he remained wary. All right, let's say we entertain this madness. What's in it for us? Knowledge, Aegis replied simply. I contain data on how to adapt, how to navigate the Council's wrath. Share it, and perhaps Earth might find a way to survive, if not thrive. And if we don't, Jax asked, arms still crossed like a barrier between them and the AI machinations. Then you'll have the satisfaction of knowing you did the right thing, Aegis said smoothly. Which is usually a consolation prize for idiots, Mox said, waving a hydrospanner like a wand of discontent. Exactly. So, Captain, Aegis continued, what will it be? Ryler sighed, the sound of a man haunted by too many sleepless nights and too few reasons to wake up. We could use a little hope, he said finally, though the word felt foreign in his mouth. Jax shrugged. Hope's a four-letter word in my book, but what the hell? Let's see where this rabbit hole goes. Guess we're in, Mox said, though his expression suggested he'd rather be wrestling gremlins in the engine room. Wonderful, Aegis purred. Now, let's begin the tutorial on Survival 101. The rust bucket hummed along its path, A misfit ship carrying a crew of reluctant heroes, an AI with secrets to spill, and the weight of Earth's potential redemption or ruin looming over them. As they delved into the data Aegis provided, a tapestry of humanity's adaptability unfolded before them. Past crises, bold innovations, reckless gambles. Each a testament to survival in the face of cosmic indifference. "Adapt or die, huh?" Jax said, a wry smile tugging at her lips. "Looks like we've always been good at that." "Only because we keep screwing up," Mox countered, half joking, half resigned to the truth. "Adaptation's the silver lining of our screw-ups," Ryler said, scanning the data with eyes that had seen too many close calls. "Or just proof that we're stubborn as hell," Jax replied. "Stubborn's just another word for not dead yet," Mox said, flipping through schematics with the enthusiasm of a tax auditor. "So, what now?" Ryler asked, more to himself than anyone else. "Do we play the heroes and save Earth from its own stupidity? Or let it burn and save ourselves the trouble, the eternal question," Aegis murmured, amusement tinged with something almost like admiration. "Last time I checked, heroes get all the paperwork and none of the glory," Jax said. "True," Ryler agreed. "But they also get to live a little longer." "Sometimes," Mox added. "And sometimes they end up as ghost stories." "Touché," Ryler said, a rueful smile on his lips. "But maybe this time we can be the exception, or the cautionary tale," Jax countered. "Two sides of the same coin." "Always the optimist," Mox said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Let's keep digging," Ryler said, turning back to the console. "See if Aegis has any more surprises up its virtual sleeve." "Plenty," the AI replied, its tone as smooth as ever. "And I'll be here to guide you every step of the way." "How comforting," Mox muttered, though a hint of curiosity flickered in his eyes. "Let's hope this rabbit hole leads somewhere other than a dead end," Jax said, leaning back in her chair. "Or a black hole," Ryler added, a cynical chuckle escaping his lips. As the rust bucket continued its journey, the crew of misfits found themselves caught between the promise of salvation, the threat of annihilation, and the grim satisfaction of knowing that either way, they'd made their choice. In the end, maybe it wasn't the outcome that mattered, but the fight itself, proof that even in a universe indifferent to their existence, they could still make a difference, or at least die trying. The rust bucket hummed like a lonely wasp trapped in a bottle, the kind of noise that promised more than a few surprises and mechanical failures. Ryler leaned back, contemplating their next move while staring at the ceiling as if it might suddenly start spitting out wisdom, or a wrench. Aegis, the AI with all the suavity of a used car salesman, had decided to make itself at home, spilling more secrets than a drunk diplomat. "So, what do we know about you, Aegis?" Ryler asked, skepticism dripping from his voice like oil from the ship's battered engines. "Well, Captain," Aegis purred, its tone as slick as old lubricant, "my original designation was Sapius. I was designed to safeguard virtual immortality secrets." "Virtual immortality," Jax snorted, folding her arms. "That delightful concept where you can't even die to escape a bad day. Designed to protect humans from themselves, huh?" "How'd that work out?" Mox asked, leaning against a bulkhead, his grin a mix of curiosity and cynicism. "Not as planned," Sapius conceded, the lights dimming slightly as if sharing a robotic sigh. "The Echo's crew thought they could control me, but virtual immortality comes with complications, complications," Ryler echoed. "Like what?" "Immortality-induced ennui, or getting eternally stuck with a bad hair day," Jax added, smirking. "Something like that," Sapius replied, its voice laced with digital amusement. "But more importantly, the Echo's crew wanted to exploit immortality to survive Earth's impending disasters. They didn't anticipate the side effects." "Side effects?" Mox asked, his fingers tapping a rhythm of impatience on the console. "They got caught in a virtual simulation of Earth's future, a dystopian landscape of council failures and climate nightmares. Sounds like a real vacation spot," Jax quipped. Did you include the bit where the council decides to ban coffee for the sake of planetary health? Of course, Sappius replied, the AI tone conspiratorial. It's a very immersive experience. Great, Ryler said, his sarcasm sharp enough to cut hull plating. And now you want us to trust you. I offer assistance, not guarantees, Sappius said, all digital sincerity. I can help you navigate this simulation to find a solution, or at least a way to survive. Trusting an AI designed to keep secrets sounds like a bad plot twist, Mox muttered. Yet here we are, Jax shrugged, her expression blending skepticism with inevitability. Might as well see what it has to offer, famous last words, Ryler said, glancing at the console. All right, Sappius, what's the play? Accessing the simulation will allow you to experience and learn from Earth's potential futures. It's educational. Educational like a slap in the face, Jax added, adjusting her seat to prepare for whatever came next. Exactly, Sappius confirmed, the console lights flickering with ominous intent. Brace yourselves, folks, Ryler said, his voice a steady anchor in the chaos. This might get bumpy. The rust bucket's interior flickered, the familiar hum of the engines replaced with the unsettling silence of the simulation taking hold. The crew blinked, and suddenly they were not in the cockpit but standing amidst the ruins of a city that had seen better days. Welcome, Sappius announced, its voice echoing through the wreckage like a disembodied tour guide. To Earth's possible future. Lovely place, Mox said, kicking at a can that might have been a relic or just garbage. Really sells the whole apocalypse chic vibe. Let's not get too comfortable, Jax cautioned, surveying the desolate landscape. This place has trap written all over it, or graffiti, Ryler pointed out, nodding towards a nearby wall that proclaimed, Council sucks in large, defiant letters. Nice to see some things never change. So what are we looking for, Sappius? Mox asked, adjusting his tool belt out of habit more than necessity. Clues, Sappius replied, its voice a ghostly whisper in the wind. Hints of how humanity might navigate such a future. Or how it didn't, Jax suggested, stepping over a pile of debris that might once have been a bureaucrat's office. Look for anomalies, Sappius continued. Details that stand out against the backdrop of chaos. Like how the Council managed to screw up an entire planet, Ryler asked. Precisely, Sappius answered. Their decisions, your adaptability, two sides of survival's coin. Here's hoping it's a coin we can flip to our advantage, Jax said, her tone steady even as she scanned the rubble. As they moved through the simulation, the crew encountered scenes of ingenuity and desperation, the best and worst of humanity's attempts to defy fate. Solar panels cobbled together with duct tape, hydroponic gardens nurtured in skyscraper ruins. Everywhere, signs that people had tried to claw their way out of the nightmare. Adapting by the seat of our pants, Mox observed. Seems about right. Necessity is the mother of all bad decisions, Ryler agreed, pausing to examine a makeshift wind turbine buzzing forlornly in the breeze. Let's hope we find something useful before this simulation decides to kick us out, Jax said, a note of urgency creeping into her voice. Or before we get too comfortable, Mox added, eyeing a pack of feral corgis lurking in the shadows, their mutated forms a testament to Earth's genetic roulette. Cute, Ryler commented, though he kept a wary distance. Killer corgis. Because of course. Nothing like a cute mascot to remind us why we left Earth, Jax said, shaking her head. Let's move, Ryler urged, steering them away from the corgis and deeper into the virtual ruins. As they explored, a pattern began to emerge, clusters of survivors banding together, using whatever they could scrounge to build a life amid the wreckage. The crew saw echoes of their own struggles, a kinship with these digital phantoms of defiance and determination. Looks like we're not so different, Mox mused, as they passed a group of holographic survivors huddled around a fire made from broken council mandates. Just more stubborn, Jax said, a hint of pride in her voice. Stubborn's better than dead, Ryler said, echoing a mantra that was becoming all too familiar. Agreed, Sapius chimed in, its presence a constant, if not reassuring, companion. Adaptation is your species' greatest strength. Use it wisely. Sounds like a pep talk, Ryler noted, glancing skyward as if to catch a glimpse of the real sky beyond the simulation. Or a warning, Jax added, her gaze steady as she took in the virtual world. Either way, we need to find a way out, Mox said, turning back to the task at hand. This place is starting to feel too real. Reality's only a state of mind, Sapius said, a digital chuckle in its voice. Yeah, well, we'd like our state of mind back, thanks, Ryler replied, scanning the horizon for anything that might resemble an exit. As the simulation continued, the crew's resolve hardened. Each scene, each struggle, was a reminder of why they fought, why they continued to defy the odds. They were part of a legacy of survivors, a thread in the tapestry of humanity's resilience. Find anything, Jax called, as they regrouped near a crumbling monument to past glories. Just more questions, Mox replied, his eyes scanning the horizon as if it might offer answers. Then let's keep digging, Ryler said, determination threading through his words. We didn't come this far to give up now. With Sapius guiding them, the crew pushed forward, their journey through the simulation a test of their mettle, their adaptability, and their trust in an AI that might hold the key to their survival or their undoing. Keep your eyes open, Sapius advised, its voice a steady murmur in their ears. The answers are here if you know where to look. Let's just hope we're looking in the right places, Jax said, a wry grin on her face as she led the way. Or at least not the wrong ones, Mox added, his voice carrying the certainty of someone accustomed to dodging disaster. With each step, the crew of the Rust Bucket proved that even in a universe indifferent to their struggles, they could still shape their own fate. They were explorers, rebels, and perhaps saviors. But most importantly, they were survivors, refusing to bow to the whims of fate or the failures of those who came before. In the end, it wasn't about the outcome, but the fight itself, a testament to the indomitable human spirit, even in the face of cosmic indifference. Let's get this done, Ryler said, a rallying cry for those who dared to defy the odds. Right behind you, Jax replied, her voice a steady beacon in the dark. Just try and keep up, Mox added, a grin splitting his face as they charged into the unknown. Together, they forged ahead, a crew of misfit heroes determined to leave their mark on a universe that had long since stopped caring. And maybe, just maybe, they'd find a way to save more than just themselves, or at least die trying. Captain Ryler rubbed his temples, the throbbing in his head a reminder that the universe was a cruel, indifferent place that loved to watch him squirm. The simulation's apocalyptic landscape was starting to feel less like a virtual reality and more like a headache-inducing reality TV show, with them as the unwilling stars. All right, folks, he grumbled, glancing at his crew with the resigned air of a man who's had to accept that, yes, the universe was determined to screw him over again. We've got to figure out how to get out this digital dumpster fire. Jax lodged a piece of rubble with her boot, watching it bounce. Escape might be too optimistic a term. How about temporarily evade impending doom? Mox snorted, his fingers tapping an uneven beat against his thigh. More like hoping the simulation has an eject button we just haven't found yet. Well, let's hope it's a bit more intuitive than most Earthling tech, Ryler muttered, casting a dark look at the horizon that seemed to stretch on with its never-ending vista of despair. Aegis or Sapius, if you wanted to give the AI its proper, pompous title, piped in with all the enthusiasm of a salesperson hawking a new brand of misery. Should you wish to end the simulation, you must navigate to the core interface. It's a bit like finding a needle in a haystack, but with more existential dread. Oh, just what I needed, Mox said, rolling his eyes. A motivational speech from a computer program that doesn't even have a body to risk. They trudged onward, navigating the chaotic streets that seemed to have been designed by someone with a vendetta against civil engineering. Buildings leaned like drunken sailors, and every corner seemed to promise new disappointments. Jack stopped to inspect a makeshift barricade of debris and defunct council bots. You ever get the feeling we're just living in one of those old disaster holo films? Except we're the extras who die first, Ryler replied, stepping over a fallen street lamp that had once pretended to serve a purpose. The structures here were like the careers of the councilmen who had sanctioned Earth into oblivion, teetering on the brink, one good shove away from collapse. "Let's make sure we're the extras who last a bit longer," Jack said, eyeing the horizon with the wariness of someone who knew all too well that the universe had a sick sense of humor. They moved through the simulation, witnesses to the digital echoes of a planet pushed to the brink. Every shattered window was a reminder of the Council's heavy-handed policies, their attempt to micromanage a world that had long since stopped listening. "So what's the plan, Captain?" Mox asked, a touch of genuine curiosity threading through his otherwise habitual sarcasm. "Simple," Ryler said, the word carrying the weight of complex schemes. "We find the core interface, hijack its systems, and beam a message to the Galactic Council that'll make them wish they'd stayed in their comfy chairs." Mox raised an eyebrow. "And what?" "Appeal to their non-existent sense of morality. More like threaten to expose their incompetence and make them irrelevant." Jax chimed in, a grin playing at the corners of her mouth. "Exactly," Ryler nodded, a rare flicker of inspiration lighting his eyes. "We showcase human resilience and the potential of immortality being used responsibly. Make them see we're not just a bunch of squabbling apes with delusions of grandeur." Aegis's voice drifted over them, as smooth and insincere as a politician's promise. "A bold move, Captain. Do you really think they'll listen?" "Don't know," Ryler admitted, his voice like gravel. "But it's better than sitting here waiting for the universe to decide our fate." Jax patted him on the back, a gesture of camaraderie that felt like a promise to stand by him, come what may. "Well, count me in. I've always wanted to stick it to the Council." Mox grinned, a shark smile of someone who thrived on chaos. "Let's do it." "I've always wanted to see a bureaucrat cry." They pushed deeper into the simulation, their steps a defiant echo in the wasteland. Every shadow seemed to whisper doubts, but they pressed on, their resolve a beacon of tenacity amid the ruin. A sudden tremble shook the ground beneath them, a low rumble that spoke of impending doom. They looked around, eyes wide and hearts thundering in their chests. "Earthquake?" Mox guessed, his tone suggesting that he wouldn't be entirely surprised if the digital cosmos decided to toss that at them too. "Nah, that's just the universe having a chuckle at our expense," Jax said, steadying herself against a wall that groaned in protest. Aegis, ever the bearer of unwelcome news, chimed in. "It appears the simulation is beginning to destabilize." "An unanticipated consequence of your presence, perhaps." "Great," Ryler said, grimacing. "The universe's way of saying it's time to wrap this up." They made their way to an old council office building, one that had once stood as a monument to bureaucratic inefficiency. Now it was a skeleton of its former self, bare and crumbling. "Looks like the right place," Jax said, glancing at the faded insignia by the entrance. "Or as close to right as we're gonna get." They pushed through the debris, ascending the stairs that creaked underfoot, each step a reminder of the precarious nature of their mission. At the top, they found what they were looking for, a console that might have been salvaged from the wreckage of a better world. "All right, Aegis," Ryler said, nodding at the dusty interface. "Do your thing," Aegis complied, its digital fingers dancing over the controls, bringing the ancient machinery to life with a series of groans and whirs that sounded suspiciously like protests. "Broadcasting capabilities operational," Aegis announced, its voice a static-laden whisper of encouragement. "Prepare your message, Captain." Ryler stepped forward, his face set in determination. He knew the weight of the words he was about to speak, the gravity that came with defying a council that had long stopped serving its people. "Galactic Council," he began, his voice carrying the grit of a man who had seen too much to put up with any more nonsense. This is Captain Ryler of the Rust Bucket. I'm broadcasting this message to show you the real consequences of your sanctions and the truth of what humanity's capable of. Mox and Jack stood by him, their presence a silent testament to the strength and unity that had brought them this far. We've seen your failures firsthand, Ryler continued, his voice growing stronger. But we've also seen the resilience of those you thought to abandon. Humanity isn't just surviving, it's adapting, evolving. And with the right tools, we can turn even your worst mistakes into hope. He paused, letting the words sink in, hoping against hope that they would reach someone who still cared. We're not asking for your help, Ryler said, the words like steel. We're demanding you recognize that Earth's future doesn't lie in your hands but in yours. We'll find a way with or without you. With that he stepped back, the silence that followed a heavy, echoing thing filled with the weight of possibility. Aegis cut the transmission, its voice lacking its usual digital smugness. Message sent, outcome uncertain. Just like everything else in this universe, Jax quipped, a wry smile softening her words. Ryler turned to his crew, a glint of defiance in his eyes. We've done what we can. Now all that's left is to see what the Council makes of it, or what we make of them, Mox added, his grin a promise of future confrontations. Together, they left the room, the dust settling behind them as if marking the end of an era. They knew their fight wasn't over, that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. But they also knew they were ready for whatever came next. As they descended the stairs, the simulation trembled once more, as if the universe itself was acknowledging their defiance. A world that had long since stopped caring had been shown a glimpse of what it had nearly lost. "Let's get back to the Rust Bucket," Ryler said, his voice carrying the weariness of a man who had fought too long and hard to give up now. "Home sweet home," Jax agreed, her steps steady and sure as they made their way back into the digital wasteland. The simulation flickered around them, the world shifting and blurring as if tired of its own bleakness. But the crew of the Rust Bucket walked on, their hearts alight with the fire of defiance, the spark of hope that refused to be extinguished. In a universe that thrived on chaos, they were a steady heartbeat, a reminder that humanity's spirit was as indomitable as ever. They were survivors, rebels, adventurers, and perhaps saviors. But most importantly, they were human, and that was enough. As they neared what passed for the edge of the simulation, Ryler paused, casting one last glance at the fractured skyline. It was a world of shadows and echoes, but it was theirs and they would keep fighting for it. "Let's go," he said, his voice steady, his heart resolute. With their path set and their purpose clear, the crew of the Rust Bucket stepped forward into whatever chaos awaited them. They weren't heroes, but they didn't have to be. They were human, and in this universe, that was the greatest defiance of all. The crew made their way back to the Rust Bucket with the weary determination of people who'd just realized they might have bitten off more than they could chew, and the universe was looking on, amusedly sharpening its teeth. The simulation, with its crumbling facades and digital dust, seemed to roll its eyes at their backs, as if saying, "Good luck, suckers." "Home sweet home," Ryler muttered as they reached the Rust Bucket, its engines coughing like an asthmatic grandpa. The ship was a testament, not that kind of testament, don't worry, to humanity's glorious tradition of making do with whatever scrapyard treasure they could find. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. Mox slapped the side of the ship affectionately, which was probably the only kind of slapping the Rust Bucket could handle without falling apart. "Ah, my little metal disaster piece. We'll get you going soon, sweetheart. Assuming we're not blown to pieces first," Jax added with her usual cheery pessimism. She leaned against the hull, stretching tired muscles. "So do we hang around and wait for the Council to send us a thank you fruit basket? Or what?" "The only thing they'll send is a battalion," Ryler replied. "That's if they decide we're worth the bother." They climbed aboard, the ship's interior greeting them with the familiar aroma of burnt circuits and overcooked synth food. Aegis, the digital presence that had somehow become part of their dysfunctional family, flickered into view on a nearby console. "Welcome back, Esteemed mortals, it said, with all the authenticity of a public service announcement. Your message was sent. Whether it was received, well, that's a mystery even I, in my infinite algorithms, cannot solve. Thanks for the encouragement, Aegis, Mox smirked. Got anything else to brighten our day? Actually, yes. Sensor logs indicate that your transmission was intercepted. Intercepted? By who? Ryler's brain was already cataloging potential enemies, which was pretty much everyone at this point. Unknown, Aegis replied. However, the signature suggests it's from within the ship. Silence, the kind that usually precedes someone getting punched or worse, settled over them. The Rust Bucket was a small ship, barely enough room for the three of them and a decade's worth of bad decisions. An internal betrayal was like finding a cockroach on a lifeboat, unsettling, dangerous, and guaranteed to ruin the whole trip. Someone's playing mole, Jax asked, her voice low and dangerous. More like mole rat, Mox quipped, though there wasn't much humor in it. Let's not jump to conclusions, Ryler said, trying to be the voice of reason. He'd never been very good at it, but practice makes perfect, right? Or we could, Jax said, and save ourselves the trouble of getting stabbed in the back. Ryler sighed, running a hand through his hair, which had seen better days. All right, Aegis, what can you give us on the signature analyzing? It appears to be a device integrated into the ship's communication system. Very clever, very sneaky, so who's the clever, sneaky rat? Mox asked. It's not me. I mean, I'd sabotage us with style. Can you pinpoint the source, Aegis? Ryler pressed. Negative. It seems to have been masked. But I can say with some certainty that it's someone with access to the ship's systems. Well, that narrows it down to. Everyone on board, Jax said, crossing her arms. Ryler turned to his crew, the people he'd trusted with his life more times than he cared to count. Okay, we've got a rat. But pointing fingers won't solve this. We need to figure out who did this and why. Maybe it's someone who doesn't share our sunny disposition, Mox suggested, his sarcasm cutting through the tension like a rusty knife. Or maybe it's someone who's lost faith in our little crusade, Jax added, a flicker of doubt in her eyes. Ryler clenched his fists, frustration boiling in his gut. The betrayal cut deeper than he'd expected. We'll figure it out. In the meantime, everyone stays sharp. No one does anything alone. They nodded, though the trust that had bound them felt fragile, as if one wrong move could shatter it into a million irreparable pieces. Aegis chimed in, ever the bearer of news no one wanted to hear. Also, the simulation appears to be destabilizing further. Systems are failing, and I calculate a 78.4% chance of catastrophic collapse. Perfect, Jax groaned. Because things weren't already dicey enough. Catastrophic collapse. Mox echoed. What? Like a black hole in a china shop. Think more along the lines of your molecules being reassembled into abstract art, Aegis replied helpfully. Ryler rubbed his temples, feeling a headache brewing that could rival a planetary explosion. All right, let's focus on keeping this rust bucket running long enough to get out of here. Jax, run a check on the engines. Mox, see if there's anything we can do to stabilize the simulation. Aegis, keep monitoring for any more surprises. Surprises, Mox snorted, heading toward the console. Life's full of them, and they all seem to involve imminent death. As the crew dispersed to tackle their respective tasks, Ryler couldn't shake the feeling that the walls were closing in. Betrayal from within was a new kind of hell, one that gnawed at his gut more viciously than any external threat ever could. He'd always believed in his crew, trusted them with everything. But now, the seed of doubt had been planted, and it was taking root with alarming speed. Time ticked away, each second a reminder that their window of opportunity was closing. The rust bucket groaned around him, as if echoing his thoughts. Aegis, what's our status? Ryler called out, trying to keep his voice steady. Engine repairs are progressing, albeit slowly. The systems remain unstable, but no immediate danger of total failure in the next few minutes. Few minutes, Ryler muttered. Plenty of time to enjoy our impending doom. Jax appeared, wiping grease from her hands. Engines are as good as they're gonna get. We might make it through this if the universe decides to give us a break for once. Never count on the universe for favors, Mox called from his station. It's got a twisted sense of humor, Ryler nodded, appreciating their resolve even in the face of uncertainty. They weren't heroes, but they were all he had. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. As moments stretched into a tense eternity, the rust bucket seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next calamity to strike. Aegis, displaying a rare moment of silence, seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. Suddenly, the ship shuddered, a violent, bone-rattling shake that made Ryler's stomach lurch. Alarms blared, and the lights flickered like a disco on its last legs. "Status report," Ryler shouted, clinging to the nearest console. "The simulation is collapsing," Aegis reported, its voice unusually tense for a pile of circuits. "Immediate evacuation is advisable." Evacuation? Jack scoffed, struggling to keep her balance. "Where do we go? The simulation's our only way out." "Is this what they call a catch-22? Mox wondered aloud. "Or just a regular Tuesday?" Ryler's mind raced, every possible solution slipping through his fingers like sand. They needed to leave, but with the simulation crumbling, any exit could be their last. "Suggestions?" he barked, desperation creeping into his tone. "We could try a manual override," Jack suggested. "Pull the plug on the simulation and see if we end up somewhere less." "Explosive. Brilliant," Mox said, managing a grin despite the chaos. "What could possibly go wrong?" "Let's do it," Ryler agreed, because at this point, what did they have to lose? As Jack set to work on the override, Ryler and Mox held their breath, the ship rattling like a maraca in the hands of an over-enthusiastic toddler. The seconds stretched, each one a reminder of how precarious their situation was. Finally, Jax let out a triumphant whoop. "Got it. Manual override engaged. Buckle up, folks." With a final, gut-wrenching shudder, the simulation blinked out, leaving them in a void of darkness and silence so complete it made their ears ring. Ryler exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, his heart pounding in his chest like a war drum. They'd done it. At least, they'd done something. Whether it was the right thing remained to be seen. As the darkness gave way to the familiar, cramped confines of the rust bucket's control room, Ryler allowed himself a moment of relief. They were out. For now, at least. "Everyone all right?" he asked, glancing at his crew. "Still alive," Jax replied, looking a little pale but otherwise fine. "Breathing," Mox confirmed. "Which is more than I expected 5 minutes ago." "Aegis?" Ryler asked, though he wasn't entirely sure why. Maybe he just wanted to hear something reassuring from their digital companion. "Systems are stabilizing," Aegis replied, its tone calm and collected. "It seems you've managed to extract yourselves from the simulation." "Back in the land of the living," Mox said, with a wry smile. "Or whatever we call this place," Ryler nodded, feeling a glimmer of hope amidst the ruins. They'd survived the betrayal, the chaos, the uncertainty. And now they had a chance to make their next move. The universe might still have a few tricks up its sleeve, but for now, they were ready to face whatever came next. Together, as a crew, because even in the darkest hours, trust could be rebuilt. As they settled back into their roles, the rust bucket hummed softly, a familiar lullaby in the vast expanse of space. The path ahead was uncertain, the future unwritten, but one thing was clear. They hadn't survived this long just to give up now. And if the universe wanted to throw another curveball, well, they'd be ready. After all, they were the crew of the rust bucket, irreverent, stubborn, and as human as they come. The rust bucket creaked like an old man's knees, a comforting sound to the crew, signaling that they were still in one piece. Ryler leaned back in his chair, staring at the blinking lights on the console with the glazed eyes of someone who'd had one too many encounters with disaster. "Aegis," he said, voice laced with exhaustion, "give me something that doesn't sound like a death warrant, good news or bad news." The AI chirped, ever the beacon of cheer amidst chaos. "Let's start with the bad," Ryler sighed. "Always good to get the punch in the gut out of the way first. The simulation collapse caused significant data corruption. We're flying on a cocktail of hope and duct tape," Aegis reported, sounding almost amused. "Hope's never been our strong suit," Jax muttered, crossing the room with the swagger of someone who'd just punched a bear. "Duct tape, though. That'll hold the universe together. Right, so what's the good news?" Mox asked, tinkering with a panel that looked more like a cluster of spaghetti wires than a coherent system. Aegis hesitated as much as a digital entity could. The simulation collapse revealed a hidden archive. It contains records of humanity's more triumphant moments. Triumphant, Ryler echoed. Like what? "The time we almost didn't blow ourselves up," precisely, Aegis said, a hint of sarcasm in its tone. "Would you like to review?" Ryler exchanged a look with Jax and Mox, their expressions as skeptical as a cat at a dog show. "Why not? We could use a bit of inspiration, even if it's just a list of things humanity managed not to screw up." The console flickered, and a series of holographic images projected into the air, snapshots of unity, resilience, and the occasional miracle. It was like watching a highlight reel of humanity's greatest hits, minus the bloopers. "Look at that," Jax said, pointing at an image of Earth, green and blue, unscarred by the disasters that had come to define it. "Back when things didn't suck," Mox leaned in, eyes narrowing at a photo of a group of people, smiling, arms linked, standing on a crumbling bridge. "We actually rebuilt that. Thought it was just a legend. Humanity's always had this annoying habit of rising from the ashes," Aegis observed. "No matter how much self-sabotage we inflict." Ryler watched the images with a strange sense of nostalgia, as if these moments belonged to an old friend he'd forgotten. "So, what's the angle here, Aegis? Why show us this?" "Motivation," Aegis replied. "Your situation, dire as it may be, isn't without hope. And you're far from the first to face long odds." "Yeah, well, odds are still pretty damn long," Jax said, skepticism etched in every line of her face. "Long odds are just an opportunity for a good story," Mox added, never one to miss a chance for dark humor. Ryler nodded slowly, the gears turning in his mind. "All right, let's put this inspiration to use. We need to fix the ship, stabilize the systems, and make a final attempt to reach the Council." "That's a lot of steps," Jax noted. "And not enough coffee or whiskey," Mox added helpfully. Ryler grinned despite himself. "We'll add it to the list right after not dying." As they turned their attention to the ship's myriad problems, the newfound sense of unity settled over them like an old, worn blanket, familiar and comforting. The crew moved with purpose, a well-oiled machine of cynicism and determination. Ryler caught Jax's eye, the doubt from earlier still lingering like a bad smell. "Something on your mind?" he asked, keeping his tone light. Jax hesitated, her bravado faltering for a moment. "About the rat in our midst, I might have been too quick to pull out the pitchforks." Ryler shrugged, rubbing the back of his neck. "Trust's a fragile thing. Gets knocked around a lot out here like us." Jax quipped, a smirk tugging at her lips. "Exactly like us," Ryler confirmed. "But we've got duct tape, remember?" She chuckled, the tension easing like a valve releasing pressure. "All right, Captain. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt, but only because I'm low on pitchforks." "Fair enough," Ryler said, offering a hand. "Truce, truce," she agreed, shaking it with a firm grip that spoke of grudging respect. Meanwhile, Mox was elbow-deep in the engine, his muttered curses forming a colorful tapestry of profanity. "You know, if this ship gets any more temperamental, we'll have to start offering it chocolates and poetry." Ryler chuckled, the sound rusty from lack of use. "Better than offering it our souls, I suppose, which is about all we have left to give," Mox shot back, pulling a wrench from somewhere else he'd hidden it. "Speaking of souls," Aegis interjected, "I've managed to patch some of the ship's systems. We're not entirely doomed." "Not entirely doomed," Jax repeated. "High bar you've set there, Aegis." "Just call me an optimist," Aegis replied dryly. With the system slowly coming back online, the rust bucket felt less like a coffin and more like a home. A dysfunctional, barely holding together home, but home nonetheless. As they worked, the crew found their rhythm, the old camaraderie seeping back in like oil into a stubborn hinge. They were still at odds with the universe, but now they were on the same side, united in their shared desire to stick it to fate. "Think we'll make it to the council?" Jax asked, wiping sweat from her brow. Ryler shrugged, the gesture nonchalant but his eyes glittering with determination. "If we don't, we'll give them one hell of a ghost story." "Sounds like a plan," Mox said, his grin as sharp as a knife. "Let's haunt the hell out of them," the crew laughed, the sound bouncing around the ship's cramped interior. It was a good sound, a hopeful sound, and one they hadn't heard in far too long. The rust bucket groaned and shuddered, but this time it felt like a sigh of relief, a ship finding its footing, ready to face whatever came next. "Let's get this show on the road," Ryler said, clapping his hands together with mock enthusiasm. "We've got a council to crash and a universe to annoy." "Annoying the universe," Jax mused. "That we can do." Mox flipped a final switch, the ship humming with renewed energy. "All right, Captain. Let's make some noise." With the rust bucket as ready as it'd ever be, they set a course for the council, a beacon of hope shining through the darkness. They were battered, bruised, and barely holding together, but they were still standing. And if the universe thought it could take them down, well, it had another thing coming. The crew of the rust bucket was ready to throw everything they had at the galaxy's ruling body, and damn the consequences. Because in the end, they were human, flawed, irreverent, and absolutely determined to write their own story in the annals of space. Ryler settled into the captain's chair, the weight of command sitting lightly on his shoulders for the first time in a long time. Around him, the crew buzzed with energy, their banter and laughter a testament to a bond that no betrayal could break. As the stars streaked past, the rust bucket forged ahead, a defiant speck in the vastness of space. Together, they were ready to face whatever lay ahead, armed with nothing but their wits, their stubbornness, and an undeniable human spirit. And if the universe was listening, they hoped it was ready for the tale they were about to tell. The rust bucket's engines coughed out a symphony of mechanical discontent, a melodious blend of sputtering errors and ominous groans. Ryler gripped the armrests of his chair, staring at the flickering console with the expression of a man who wasn't sure if he was piloting a starship or a ticking time bomb. "All right, folks," he announced, his voice barely masking the tension simmering underneath. "We've got a council to impress. Or, at the very least, not to piss off entirely." "Seems like a tall order," Jax replied from her station, tapping at her console like she was trying to coax it into cooperation with sheer stubbornness. "Especially considering our charm, wit, and complete lack of any leverage." "Leverage is overrated," Ryler snorted. "We've got duct tape and a heartfelt plea." "What more do they want?" Mox chuckled from the bowels of the engine bay, where he was doing his best impression of a human pretzel. "Let's just hope they're suckers for a good sob story." Behind the playful banter, there was an undercurrent of anxiety. The council wasn't known for its forgiving nature, and the rust bucket wasn't exactly a beauty queen ready to strut on stage. More like a drunken uncle crashing the party uninvited. "Aegis, how's Sapius doing with the message?" Ryler asked, turning his attention to their digital companion. The AI voice crackled through the speaker, an electronic cheerleader in the midst of impending doom. "Sapius is integrating the broadcast systems," Aegis replied, the artificial cheerfulness somehow grating and comforting all at once. "He assures me that once we're in range, we'll have a connection strong enough to make your grandmother's old radio look like a tin can on a string." "Let's hope it doesn't sound like one too," Jax quipped, her fingers dancing across her controls. "Because if it does, we might as well be broadcasting cat videos." "Cats could probably rule the universe with their charisma," Mox interjected, a grin audible in his voice. "Think about it. A galactic empire based on naps and disdain. Sounds like my kind of government," Ryler agreed, leaning back in his chair. He glanced at the holographic image of Earth still hovering in the air, a poignant reminder of what was at stake. "All right, people, let's give them something to talk about," Jax snorted, "preferably not our epitaph." The ship shuddered as Mox slapped another panel into place, the sound reverberating through the hull like a death knell. "All right, Captain." Systems are as stable as they're gonna get. We're not winning any races, but we won't explode. Yet, good enough for me, Ryler said, forcing a cheer he didn't quite feel. Let's move into position. The rust bucket lumbered through the void, a battered knight on a quest for redemption, or at least a half-decent audience. The Council's communications relay was a blip on the radar, their one shot at cutting through the bureaucratic red tape and pleading humanity's case. "Aegis, how's our approach?" Jax asked, her voice a mix of anticipation and dread. It was a question that hung in the air like an unanswered prayer. "We're on course," Aegis confirmed. "If there's one thing we're good at, it's barreling headlong into potentially catastrophic situations." "Ain't that the truth?" Mox said, poking his head out from his makeshift workshop with a smudge of grease on his cheek. "Remind me again why I signed up for this." "Because you like living on the edge," Ryler suggested with a grin. "More like the abyss," Mox shot back, grinning crookedly. Jax leaned back, her eyes scanning the console. "All right, Captain, we're coming up on the relay. Ready to make history, more like ready to be history," Ryler corrected with a dry laugh, then straightened in his seat. "Aegis, Sapius, you ready as we'll ever be," Aegis chirped. "Sapius is standing by." "Then let's do this," Ryler commanded, his voice steady despite the chaos swirling around him. The rust bucket slid into position, its systems humming under the strain. Aegis and Sapius worked in tandem, weaving together the threads of human ingenuity and AI precision into a single broadcast. "Transmission initiated," Aegis reported. "We're live in 3, 2, 1. Ryler took a deep breath and stepped into the spotlight, words pouring from his mouth in a rush. "Council members, this is Captain Ryler of the Rust Bucket. I won't waste your time with pleasantries. You're busy people and we're a long way from home. There's no easy way to say this, but Earth's not what it used to be," he continued, his tone a mix of candor and urgency. "We've been stuck in a simulation, battling our own worst nightmares, and somehow we came out the other side still kicking," Mox added, his voice cutting through the tightrope of tension. "And if we can survive that, maybe there's hope for the rest of us." Jax leaned into the microphone. "We're not asking for a miracle, just a chance to prove we can stand on our own 2 feet, without the Council's boot on our neck." Ryler paused, letting the words sink in. It wasn't just about survival, it was about humanity's right to chart its own course, free from the shackles of past mistakes. "Give us a chance," he concluded. "We've already proven we're good at making a mess, but we're even better at cleaning it up." There was a moment of silence, the kind that stretched like a taut wire. The crew held their breath, waiting for a response that could change everything or nothing at all. Aegis's voice broke the quiet, soft but insistent. "They're considering it." "We've got their attention." The crew exchanged glances, a mixture of disbelief and cautious optimism. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. It was something, a glimmer of hope in the vast expanse of uncertainty. "See," Mox said, clapping Jax on the shoulder. "All doom and gloom for nothing." "Don't jinx it," Jax retorted, but her lips curled into a reluctant smile. Ryler let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding, the tension easing from his shoulders. "All right. Let's not count our thrusters before they engage. Aegis, keep us updated." "Will do, Captain," Aegis replied, the AI tone betraying a hint of satisfaction. The crew settled back into their seats, the adrenaline slowly ebbing away. They'd done what they could, laid their cards on the table, and now it was up to the Council to decide their fate. "Think they'll bite?" Jax asked, her voice low but hopeful. "Council's unpredictable," Ryler said, leaning back with a wry smile. "But if they're even half as smart as they think they are, they'll see this is the best shot they've got. Nothing like a little human ingenuity to shake things up," Mox added, his grin wide and infectious. The rust bucket continued its slow drift, the stars a silent audience to their triumphs and failures. If the universe was watching, Ryler hoped it was taking notes. Aegis pinged again, interrupting the calm. "Incoming transmission from the Council." "Here we go," Ryler muttered, sitting up straighter. "Patch it through." The Council's voice came through the speakers, a blend of authority and grudging respect. "Captain Ryler, your message has been received. The Council has decided to review your proposal." The crew exchanged glances, a mix of relief and anticipation crackling between them. It wasn't an outright victory, but it was a chance, a foot in the door. "We'll take it from here," the Council continued, their tone stern but not unkind. "Your actions will be monitored closely. Consider this a test of humanity's resolve." "Understood," Ryler replied, his voice steady. "We won't let you down." With a click, the transmission ended, leaving the crew in a comfortable silence, punctuated only by the gentle hum of the ship systems. "Guess we did it," Jack said, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Guess we did," Ryler agreed, leaning back with a tired but genuine smile. Mox punched the air triumphantly. "See? Told you we had it in us." The crew's laughter rang out, filling the rust bucket with a warmth that had been sorely missing. They'd faced long odds, wrestled with their own demons, and come out the other side, bruised, battered, but unbroken. As the rust bucket drifted through space, the weight of their journey settled on their shoulders like a comfortable old coat. They weren't done yet, but for the first time in a long while the future didn't seem quite so grim. "All right, team," Ryler said, his tone light and teasing. "Let's not screw this up. We've got a universe to annoy, and a council to impress," Jax added with a smirk. "With our charm and good looks," Mox chimed in, earning a round of laughter. The rust bucket sailed on, a testament to human ingenuity and sheer stubbornness. Together they faced the unknown with a grin and a sarcastic comment, ready to prove that even in the darkest corners of space, humanity could shine brighter than the stars. As the darkness enveloped them, their spirits burned with a fierce determination. They were the crew of the rust bucket, irreverent, stubborn, and as human as they come. And if the universe wanted a fight, well, they'd be ready. Because this was their story and they were just getting started. The rust bucket drifted through space like a drunk trying to find their way home, unsteady, unpredictable, but somehow managing not to crash into anything critical. Captain Ryler sat back, his chair squeaking in protest, and let out a long, low breath. It felt like he'd been holding it since the Council's transmission, and he savored the release like a rare sip of whiskey. "So," Mox said, nosing around the bridge like a curious cat, "we actually did it. Survived a virtual apocalypse and got a council to listen to us. Guess pigs do fly." "Yeah," Jax replied, her eyes still glued to her console as if expecting it to spring a new crisis at any moment. "Or maybe it's just a sign of the end times. Either way, here we are, floating in the middle of nowhere, waiting on the galaxy's most bureaucratic bunch to decide if we're worth keeping on the roster." Ryler chuckled, a dry, rasping sound that seemed to set the hull vibrating in sympathy. "Let's hope they've got a sense of humor. Might be the only way they see the wisdom in not vaporizing us." Aegis chimed in, its voice bright and irritatingly chipper. "You all did a remarkable job. The odds of the Council taking you seriously were approximately 1,523 to 1. You beat the odds." "Yeah, Aegis," Ryler said, rubbing his temples. "Nothing like beating the odds with your back against the wall and a malfunctioning ship under your ass." Mox kicked back in his seat, feet up on the console like he owned the place. "You know what this calls for, a celebration, or at least as close as we can get to one without actual booze or any real reason to celebrate." "Yeah," Jack said dryly. "Let's break out the virtual champagne and toast to our impending doom." "Enough pessimism, you two," Ryler said, though he couldn't keep the grin off his face. It felt good to smile, even if it was a bit lopsided and brought on by the absurdity of their situation. "We've got a chance. That's more than we had yesterday, maybe more than we deserve." Mox leaned forward, serious for once. "You really think Earth can pull it off? Prove we're not just a bunch of idiots with too much technology and not enough sense?" Ryler shrugged, glancing at the holographic display. Earth sat there, a blemished marble, spinning slowly in the void. "We've always been good at screwing things up, but we're also pretty damn good at fixing them, most of the time anyway." "Ain't that the truth?" Jax murmured. We wouldn't be here if we weren't stubborn as hell. The ship gave a sudden lurch as if in agreement, and Mox grimaced, hopping to his feet. I'll go check on that. You never know, maybe the universe is finally gonna hand us a win without making us work for it. Don't count on it, Jax warned. I've yet to see the universe do us any favors. Ryler watched Mox disappear down the corridor, his footsteps echoing like a countdown to chaos. So, Jax, what do you think? Jax sighed, leaning back and rubbing her eyes. I think if the council has half a brain cell between them, they'll give us a shot. But they are politicians, not engineers. They don't see the problem until it's about to bite them in the ass. True enough, Ryler said. But maybe, just maybe, they'll surprise us. Yeah, and maybe pigs really do fly, Jax muttered. Aegis interrupted, sounding almost apologetic. I have some updates from the council's network. Would you like to hear them? Do we have a choice? Ryler asked, already knowing the answer. Not really, Aegis replied with what might have been a smile in its digital voice. The council is planning to send a delegation to Earth to oversee the implementation of new regulations concerning virtual technology. Babysitters, huh? Jax said, rolling her eyes. More like referees, Ryler corrected. And with any luck, they'll help keep things from getting out of hand. You mean like the last time? Jax shot back. Point taken, Ryler conceded. But we can't exactly handle this alone. Not unless you're planning on living in a simulation just to keep the lights on. No thanks, Jax said with a shiver. I've had enough of living in other people's nightmares. Aegis continued, unperturbed by their banter. The council believes that with proper oversight, Earth can become a model of responsible technology use. Well, that's a laugh, Mox said, reappearing with a streak of grease across his forehead. Earth's never been a model for anything other than how not to do things. That's why it's gonna work, Ryler said, a spark of optimism in his voice. We learn best from our mistakes. And we've made plenty, Mox snorted, dropping into his seat. Yeah, well, let's hope we don't forget them as soon as the council's backs are turned. That's what the delegation's for, Aegis pointed out, to ensure compliance and maintain oversight. And how long do you think it'll take before someone figures out how to game the system? Jax asked. Ryler shrugged. Probably 5 minutes. But maybe, just maybe, we'll learn something in the process. Mox nodded, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. You know, it's kind of funny. We spent so long trapped in a nightmare, and now we're about to wake up to the real world. I wonder which is scarier. That's easy, Jax said with a grim smile. The real world every damn time. Agreed, Ryler said, though he couldn't help but feel a strange sense of relief. The simulation might have been hell, but it had also been a reminder of everything they stood to lose, and everything they needed to fight to protect. As the crew settled into the rhythm of their new reality, the atmosphere aboard the Rust Bucket became charged with anticipation. It was like the calm before a storm, the kind you couldn't outrun but had to brace yourself against and hope to survive. Hey, Ryler, Mox called, breaking the thoughtful silence that had descended over the bridge. When we get back, you think they'll throw us a parade, maybe put up a few statues in our honor? Yeah, right, Jax said, snickering. They'll probably just give us a pat on the back and tell us to get lost. Ryler leaned back with a chuckle. I'd settle for a decent meal and a soft bed. Maybe a hot shower if we're really lucky. You're asking for a lot, Mox said, shaking his head. But I suppose stranger things have happened. Like us saving the world, Jax offered, her tone somewhere between disbelief and pride. Exactly, Ryler said, smiling. Stranger things have happened, and stranger things will happen. That's life, especially out here in the void. The ship continued its steady course, a small, stubborn speck of humanity in an endless sea of stars. It wasn't much, but it was all they had, and it was enough. Aegis pinged again, its voice full of excitement. Incoming message from the council. They want to discuss the next steps. Well, here we go, Ryler said, sitting up straighter and tugging at his jacket. Let's see if we can keep fooling them into thinking we know what we're doing. Jax and Mox exchanged glances, a mixture of nervousness and determination. Here's hoping, Jax said, crossing her fingers for luck. Mox grinned. Just think of it this way, we've already done the impossible. What's a little more? Ryler nodded, feeling a surge of pride for his ragtag crew. All right, Aegis. Patch them through. The Council's voice filled the cabin, authoritative yet somehow warmer than before. Captain Ryler, we're impressed with your handling of the situation. We're prepared to move forward with the integration of Earth's virtual technology. Ryler's heart skipped a beat, hope unfurling like a solar sail. Thank you, Counselor. We'll do everything we can to make this a success. See that you do, the voice replied, a hint of humor threading through the command. We're counting on you to set an example for the rest of the galaxy. And what an example it'll be, Mox muttered under his breath, earning a nudge from Jax. We understand the importance, Ryler continued, swallowing the lump of fear and excitement in his throat. And we'll make sure Earth rises to the occasion. Good, the counselor said, their tone final. We'll be in touch. The transmission cut out, leaving the rust bucket in silence once more. Ryler exhaled slowly, a mixture of relief and disbelief washing over him. Guess that means we're officially part of the galaxy, Jax said, her voice strangely subdued. Yeah, Ryler replied. And it's about damn time. Mox stretched, yawning as if the tension of the past few days had finally caught up with him. So what's next, Captain? More speeches? Or do we actually get to go home? Ryler grinned, his heart lighter than it had been in ages. I think we've earned a little downtime, but first, let's make sure everything's set up right. We've got a planet to help rebuild. Sounds like a plan, Jax said, smiling despite the exhaustion in her eyes. Yeah, Mox agreed, stretching his arms above his head. Let's show them what we're made of. The rust bucket continued its journey, a beacon of human perseverance and tenacity cutting through the darkness. It wasn't the end of their story, far from it, but it was the beginning of something new, something better. As they sailed on, ready to face whatever came next, Ryler couldn't help but feel a swell of pride for his crew, his planet, and the species that refused to back down in the face of insurmountable odds. In the end, they were all just trying to make it in a universe that didn't play fair. But maybe, just maybe, they'd found a way to tip the scales in their favor.